A word before we begin. If you've never been here before, welcome. This is a horror video essay channel, not a review channel, which means I'm going to be discussing spoilers. If you have any interest in seeing this film, stop the video now and go see it. If you don't have a desire to see it, well, maybe you will. At the least, you'll have a deeper understanding of some aspect of the movie, and you'll have wasted an additional 10 minutes on whatever you're avoiding doing. You think I don't see you, but I do. There's a moment early in Osgood Perkins' serial killer horror Longlegs, where FBI agent protagonist Lee Harker, played by an astonishingly good Micah Monroe, finds herself in a potential shootout with a suspect. It's a tense and dangerous situation where we assume Harker will be okay. She is the protagonist of the film, after all. But Perkins stations her in the center of the frame in front of a large window with the blinds open. Couple the staging with Perkins' predilection for using wide-angle lenses, which force the perspective of a shrunken subject subsumed by a larger environment, and you have a shot that screams to the audience that a jump scare will be happening from right behind her. But it doesn't. There's no crash, there's no gunshot, there's no shattering of glass, there's no relief. In 2016, Francis McAndrew and Sarah Conkey published a first-of-its-kind study on the psychological concept of being creeped out. Other scholars had done research on social stigma and a feeling of light repulsion or chill when their conversation partners didn't obey traditional social cues, but this was the first study to expand it to the physiological response. What McAndrew and Conkey found was that creepy fight-or-flight mode. So the humans who felt creeped out got to survive and pass on their genetic material to the next generation, and the people who thought that the tiger was their friend got mauled and didn't pass on their genetic material. And this creepiness is the level on which many of our best horror directors working today operate. If you remember back to my Barbarian video, I talked about how creepy the first 20 minutes or so of the film felt, and how it was based on security expert Gavin de Becker's The Gift of Fear. De Becker talks about the value of feeling creeped out in a given situation, and how many people, women especially, should obey that feeling. And Zach Kreger, the director of Barbarian, expertly uses the ambiguity over whether Keith is a dangerous guy against the audience. Throughout the first two-thirds of Longlegs, that is how Osgood Perkins manipulates the audience as well. And honestly, even before that, the creepiness was established through the film's viral marketing campaign. Star Nicolas Cage was intentionally kept off the screen and out of print materials so that the audience would clamor for his first appearance. One memorable clip documents actress Micah Monroe's heartbeat the first time she saw Nicolas Cage in full makeup. But we never see Cage, just Monroe's reaction. And before we move on, I suppose I should briefly recap the plot of the film, in case you were one of the few people who were able to avoid any kind of Longlegs news up until now. Longlegs is the name of a serial killer who targets families once a year, always leaving a note at the scene written in cryptogram. The police are baffled, especially since Longlegs doesn't actually seem to do any of the killings, somehow convincing one of the parents to kill the family before killing themselves. Because she shows an intuitive grasp on the killer, Lee Harker, played by Micah Monroe as something as a cross between Clarice Starling and Lisbeth Salander, joins the FBI task force. Harker is easily able to decipher the code, leading to a confluence of satanic roots, creepy mind-controlling dolls, an unhinged serial killer, and her own childhood trauma. But the plot is almost incidental to the feelings that the film evokes. The film's own press release asks, "What if a movie could replicate the all-consuming but still somehow unplaceable feeling of being trapped in a prison of your darkest subconscious, where the elemental fears of childhood boogeyman blend terrifyingly together with the anxieties and responsibilities of adulthood?" It feels like, and the press release confirms, that the film is trying to straddle the line between a traditional serial killer film and the more meditative, experiential horror of films like Skinamarink. In his book on the horror genre, Stephen King relates the story of Trilogy of Terror screenwriter Bill Nolan, explaining that if you hear scratching behind the door at the top of a long staircase, the walk up that staircase before you reach the door is almost unbearable. We see this in one of Longlegs' most excruciating scenes, when Lee Harker, who lives in a remote cabin in the woods, receives a knock at the door while deciphering a letter from the killer. Harker is, of course, dwarfed in space thanks to the cinematography, which invites us to monitor the entirety of her surroundings, including a looming kitchen doorway behind her. The film is rife with moments where something frightening should occur, but it doesn't, so the audience never quite gets that release. It's like cinematic edging. You're welcome for that term, TV tropes. The flip side of this is in the flashback scenes, which are represented in one of those square format 8mm Fisher-Price cameras. This is where we first meet Longlegs and Lee Harker, and there's a specific thematic reason her memories are mostly recorded through the limited frame of a camera, which becomes a pivotal point in the movie. But this combination of wide-angle lenses and narrow frames pulls the audience into a perspective that we don't really want. We like to be passive observers, safely distant from the action, but Perkins' camera compels us to look down that dark alley at the noise. I've seen a number of reviews on YouTube that say that they walked away somehow disappointed or that the film was overhyped. And while some reviewers are more self-aware and more articulate than others, the common thread is that they found the final act disappointing in comparison to the first two parts of the film. That's an experience that mirrors my own while watching the film, and I think the reason is that eventually everyone has to put their cards on the table. The last part of that Bill Nolan story is that after that long walk up the staircase to investigate the scratching sound, you have to throw open the door. And unfortunately for the filmmaker, nothing is ever as scary as the walk up that staircase. It's a disappointing payoff because the nature of our senses makes it disappointing. McAndrew and Conkey describe a situation in which a mugger is holding a gun to your face. And that is, of course, a dangerous situation, a frightening one even. But it's not, strictly speaking, creepy. That unnerving feeling of not knowing is gone. You're aware of the danger, you're aware of the threat. Now you're just assessing what the best course of action is. And that's not to say that it's not scary to have a gun shoved in your face. But paradoxically, most Americans would rather have the gun shoved in their face than have the possibility raised that a gun might be shoved in their face and not have that question answered. All this helps explain why, if you're watching this in the summer of 2024, it'll make sense, many women are choosing the bear over the man if they were to hypothetically encounter one in the woods. And many men are reacting to this news with the exact behavior that one would want to avoid when meeting a stranger in the woods. But for those women who are answering in good faith, one would expect to see more women choose the bear, which is a rational, concrete, easily definable danger, over the man, who is much more ambiguous in the potential threat that he poses. And here's how you know that this is right. If the movie Barbarian had opened with Georgina Campbell's character finding out that a bear had broken into her Airbnb, it would have been a call to animal control in a 2-minute-long film. So when Nicolas Cage actually does show up in the film looking like Tiny Tim cosplaying Marilyn Manson and sounding like Paul Bearer, "Oh, my Camaro, you're gonna have to face my Undertaker in a Hell in a Cell!" a part of us is relieved. We're still creeped out, but it's a different kind of creeped out now. It's the cringy creepiness of social anxiety, rather than the preternatural horror that could have awaited us. Once we meet him, Longlegs seems more like a guy who pushes a shopping cart full of tumbleweeds around town. Yes, he's weird looking, but he's somehow socially functional. He frequents the general store. He apparently has a driver's license and a registration. This guy ordered a license plate at some point. And that's how he works in the film. He's not so grotesque as to be an overt monster. He's just objectionable enough to be an, oh shit, it's that guy. Cross the street before he sees us coming. It's his social awkwardness that makes us creeped out. And if the reaction of my theater is any indication, he walks that fine line between, this guy is creepy and I want him to go away, and this guy is so cringe that I just have to laugh. And for those of you who have already seen the film, I'm about to blow your goddamn minds. In McAndrew and Conkey's 2016 publication, they asked 1,341 respondents the following question.
Imagine a close friend of yours whose judgment you trust. Now imagine that this friend tells you that she or he just met someone for the first time, and tells you that the person was creepy.
The researchers then did a factor analysis of the results to determine the characteristics that would lead to a label of creepy. They include: the person invaded a friend's personal space. The person had a peculiar smile. The person had bulging eyes. The person had long fingers. The person had unkempt hair. The person had very pale skin. The person had bags under their eyes. The person was dressed oddly. The person laughed at unpredictable times. The person had a weird hobby like doll collecting. If Zach Kreger took inspiration from The Gift of Fear, I would absolutely believe that Osgood Perkins took direct inspiration from McAndrews and Cronky. Longlegs in the hands of Perkins and Cage is a frightening creation. But, as Nolan says, eventually you have to pay it off by opening the door, and whatever is behind the door will never live up to what was in our imagination. Sometimes directors like Robert Wise or Jacques Tourneur will try to get around that by never actually opening the door, like Edgar Allan Poe revealing darkness there and nothing more. Perkins tries to avoid that problem by having Longlegs not be the ultimate villain, but I think that's where many people part with the movie. Many people were expecting a Clarice Buffalo Bill showdown in the cellar or something. But instead, Longlegs offs himself in a way that is becoming increasingly cliched. And we get a tragic finale instead that, while tense, isn't really all that scary. It feels like Perkins might have gotten into his own head a little too much, as I think he did with Gretel and Hansel, where he wants the final act to be impactful, thematic, and meaningful, when it could have done all those things by just sticking to the basics. In the end, Longlegs is a masterclass in taking that long, agonizing walk up the stairs. From the marketing campaign to the opening scene to the harrowing exploration of Harker's cabin, the film just keeps ramping up the tension until there's nothing left but to open the door.
Hello?
If you don't know, now you know. Stay cool, stay safe, wash your hands, return your shopping carts, make good choices, and I'll see you next time.